Chapter 18. Stan, the Taxi Man. I'm not sure if Tintin ever woke up on the morning of an adventure feeling hungry and sick at the exact same time, but that's how I felt when I woke up the next day. It was so early that the birds had only just started to sing, and the sun hadn't risen properly yet. As soon as the sky began to turn from dark blue to golden pink, I jumped out of bed and started getting ready. The hardest thing was trying to fit my school uniform over my best clothes. It made me look all puffy like a blowfish, and the buttons on my school shirt looked like they might pop open at any moment. But luckily Mum didn't notice anything because she was tired and still rubbing her eyes a lot when I left. I got to the bus stop 15 minutes early, just like we said we would, but there was no one there except an old lady and two grown-ups in suits. After a few minutes, Tom came running up the road. I could tell right away that he hadn't slept much because his eyes looked red and his usually spiky hair was flat at the back. Then came Josie, looking as excited and nervous as I felt inside, and Michael, who tripped over his shoelaces and stumbled but kept on running anyway. "Got everything?" asked Josie. I nodded and showed her the tube map I had taken from my mum's used less drawer and the tea bags I'd taken from the kitchen jar. We'd all brought things to give to the Queen. Tom had brought a packet of shortbread biscuits, Josie had a new packet of football stickers, and Michael had brought a box of fudge that had a crown on the box. I'd brought my favourite astronaut ruler. Even though the astronaut didn't move anymore, I was sure the Queen would like it because she always wears sparkling brooches that shine like stars on her dresses. Maybe when she was in school, she wanted to be an astronaut too. When we'd stored all the presents away safely in my bag, Josie counted all the money we'd collected. All of us had emptied our piggy banks and savings jars, and Tom had gone into his brother's rooms to see what he could find. "They've got loads of coins everywhere. I can't believe I've never done it before," he exclaimed, bringing out a fistful of coins. In the end, we had exactly £27.62. A fortune. Half of £27.62 is... Josie squeezed her eyes tight and quickly did the maths in her head. £13.81. She gave half of the money to me and half to Tom for safekeeping. "Are you sure you know which tube to take?" asked Josie. The freckles on her face were sliding up and down because she was scrunching up her nose every few seconds. She only ever does that when she's nervous, and it makes her look like a hamster. "Yep, we take the pink line to King's Cross and then the dark blue line to Green Park," I said. "Mum always takes me on the trains for our really big adventures, so I know the way." "How far is the palace from the train station?" asked Tom. His voice sounded squeaky, but I couldn't tell if that was because he was nervous or excited. "I don't know," I said, "but I don't think there's a bus stop in front of the palace, so we might need to take a taxi. It shouldn't be too far, though, so hopefully we won't spend all our money." "Guys, our bus is here," said Michael, as he stuck out his hand so that the bus driver would stop. "Remember what to tell Mrs. Khan," I whispered loudly, "that me and Tom are sick, and our mum said we'll be back in tomorrow." Josie nodded. "Good luck," and giving us a quick wave, she followed Michael onto the bus to school. After the bus had disappeared, Tom and I crossed the street and walked up to the bus stop where all the buses travelling in the opposite direction stopped. When the bus we needed finally came, I put out my hand and we got on, nervously looking at the bus driver in case he asked us why we weren't in school. But she didn't. In fact, she barely even looked at us. We sat on the bus all the way to the last stop, and then holding hands crossed the big road to the tube station. There were at least 1 million people, all dressed in suits, rushing around trying to get through the barriers. They looked angry and red in the face, and there was lots of tutting and head shaking. I had never been to the train station when it was so busy before, and I didn't like it. "Come on," said Tom, nudging me. We walked over to the ticket machines where there was a long line of people. Some of them looked down at us with frowns on their faces, but no one said anything, so we didn't have to say anything back. When we finally got to the front of the queue, we walked up to one of the machines. It looked more scary than I remembered. There were at least 100 buttons surrounding a large screen, and a slot that looked like a letterbox at the bottom. "Go on," whispered Tom. "Okay," I said, not wanting to be a coward. I took a deep breath, stood up on my toes, and walked over to the screen. I pressed the button for New Ticket, Child, and Buckingham Palace for the destination, but nothing happened. I tried again, but the machine started flashing. "Do you need help?" asked a woman from the queue. She was dressed in a green coat with shiny shoes. Tom's eyes became wide and he shook his head, but I nodded. The woman stepped forward. "Where do you need to go?" she asked. "Buckingham Palace," I said, "for our school trip." I tried to make my voice sound deep and grown up. The woman frowned, but then looking at her watch said, "OK." She quickly pressed lots of buttons on the screen and said, "There you go," before stepping back into the line again. We looked up at the machine, which was flashing £8.90 at us. Tom quickly got the money out of his bag and put in the exact change. 2 pieces of pink card instantly popped out like sweets from a sweet machine, and grabbing them, we thanked the lady and headed down the stairs to where I knew the trains for the city would be. We squeezed ourselves onto the platform. It was so full of people I was afraid we wouldn't be able to get on the train. I had never seen so many people squashed together in one place before. But when the train came, everyone flooded onto it like a giant wave and took us with them. Tom grabbed hold of my arm and I grabbed his, and we soon found ourselves pressed like sandwich fillings between lots of people, all busy looking at their phones or listening to music. "This is good," said Tom, his face squashed up against a large belly. I tried to nod, but someone's book was touching my head. We watched as lots of stations passed by and looked at all the different people getting on and off the train. Finally, we heard the driver announce that the next station was King's Cross. "We have to follow the dark blue line," I said to Tom after we had jumped out onto the platform. We followed signs for the Piccadilly line and got on another train. Easy. Now that I wasn't feeling so nervous, I realised I was hungry. I'd been so busy packing a present for the Queen, I'd forgotten about the emergency bag of sweets I'd meant to bring. "Do you think the Queen would mind if we had one of her biscuits?" I asked Tom. He shook his head eagerly. "She must have lots in her kitchen, especially if she has tea every day." He ripped open the packet and passed me one of the thick, crumbly fingers that lay inside. It was the most delicious biscuit I had ever had, probably because I knew it was meant to be eaten by the Queen. We had another biscuit each on the train, and after a few minutes the train lady announced, "The next station is Green Park. Please alight here for the Jubilee and Victoria lines." I like the train lady. She has a nice voice. I imagine she looks like Mary Poppins and sits at the very front of the train next to the driver in her own special chair. It must be fun going through all the stations and telling people which ones are next. We hurried off the train and followed the sign to the taxis. Running up the stairs, we found a long line of black cabs waiting in a row. Inside the one at the front was a man with curly red hair. He was eating a sandwich and bobbing his head along to the radio. When he saw us looking at him through the window, he rolled it down and leaned out. "What can I do for you two?" "Please, we need to get to Buckingham Palace," I said, as loudly and clearly as I could. The taxi man leaned forward and looked around. "Why are you on your own?" he asked, frowning. We're meeting our teacher there. We're on a trip and we got separated from our class, and our teacher said if anyone got lost, we had to meet the class there," said Tom. The taximan frowned again and rubbed his chin. "All right," he said, "hop in and be quick. I ain't here to be chauffeuring lost kids around all day." We jumped in quickly. The taximan locked the doors and in a single move swerved off. As he drove out onto the main road, he looked at us in the funny rectangular-shaped mirror that cars have at the front. Uncle Lenny says they're there so drivers can check the traffic behind them, but I think they're there so that drivers can look at people sitting in the back seat when they think no one's watching. "What will you be doing at Buckingham Palace?" he said. "We're going to meet the Queen," said Tom. "Is that right now?" asked the taximan. Tom clapped his hand over his mouth and didn't say anything else, but the taximan just laughed and said, "Well, when you see her, say hi from me." After a few minutes, the taxi came to a stop in traffic. The taximan looked at his watch. "They'll be doing the changing of the guards soon. You'll have to walk from here, I'm afraid." He turned around to look at us and pointed to his right. "You see those arches over there? Just walk under them and keep going straight down this big red road, OK? The palace is right at the end, past the water fountain." Tom nodded and took out the exact money it said on the meter. The taximan shook his head. "Don't worry, this one's on me. Just tell your teacher to be more careful next time." "Thanks," said Tom as we jumped out. "You're the best taxi driver ever." And he drove off laughing. "I like London taxi drivers," said Tom, taking out another 2 of the Queen's biscuits and stuffing them in his mouth. "They're better than the New York ones." "So do I," said, watching as the taxi disappeared out of sight.